Today we are putting the GOATs of the live-action Spider-Man against each other. Tobey Maguire's Raimi Peter versus Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man. Who wins? Well, let's find out. Starting things off with strength, and just like with MCU Peter, Raimi Peter has a massive advantage over Andrew when it comes to lifting strength, as the best feats that Andrew has, such as stopping a car or bringing a bus to a stop, is eclipsed by the feats that Tobey has, such as catching a cable car with one arm or bringing a speeding train to a halt. What's more interesting, however, is AP, or striking strength in a fight. And in No Way Home, we actually have a pretty good barometer as to how close these two Spider-Men are in terms of strength, when looking at their interactions with Curt Connors, aka the Lizard. Now, in The Amazing Spider-Man, Andrew had pretty underwhelming performances against Connors, as all he could really do is hold Lizard off, with him either stalemating or losing every encounter to Connors. But now in No Way Home we see the tables have turned, as after a brief skirmish, Andrew is able to overpower Connors, web him up, and move on as if nothing happened. A supervillain that was literally his physical superior in his solo film, by the events of No Way Home, is now a minor inconvenience to Andrew. And as for Tobey's Peter, well, even when caught off guard, he could still 1v1 Lizard on the crane, with his strikes sending Lizard flying backwards. And even when Lizard got a few hits in on Peter, it seemed to momentarily inconvenience him rather than put him down on his ass, cementing the fact that Tobey and indeed Andrew have gotten significantly stronger over the years. But what it mostly indicates is that they are very similar in terms of strength now, to the point where you could honestly make an argument for either one of them being stronger. If you forced me to decide who is stronger, I would lean towards Tobey, just because of his lifting feats, but aside from that, they are very similar in a fight and will definitely be able to contend with one another in strength. And once again with durability, well, No Way Home changed a few things. Once upon a time, Tobey would have been much more durable than Andrew, but now, the tables have turned. Both Tobey and Andrew demonstrated relative durability in their encounter against Electro, although I could possibly make an argument for Andrew being more durable than Tobey now. The reason being is because Electro was actually torturing Andrew because of Electro's experiences in TASM 2, and also when we see both Spider-Men drop to the ground, Andrew actually seems to have recovered better than Tobey did. Andrew's still on his feet, but Tobey is on his knees. Granted, you could probably chalk this up to Andrew insulating his suit better against electrical opponents in the future, which would make sense since in TASM 2 his suit was fairly damaged against Electro, but in No Way Home it's no worse for wear. However, regardless, even if Andrew was slightly more durable than Tobey, I think we would all agree that Tobey has a greater pain tolerance. The guy was beaten to a near-death state by Green Goblin in the final battle of Spider-Man 1, yet he still got up and went on to win that fight. Same can be said in Spider-Man 3, when he was nearly killed by Sandman, and yet when Harry saved him, he was up and fighting not long later, with him eventually pulling out a victory over Venom. No disrespect to Andrew, his pain tolerance is impressive, as he was mauled by Lizard and still managed to stop him, and he was tortured by Electro, and with the help of Gwen Stacy, he was still able to beat him. I just think it's more consistent for Tobey to have a better pain tolerance than Andrew. Moving on to speed now, and once again, No Way Home changed a few things, since this used to be an easy W for Andrew, since Tobey's speed feats of casually dodging gunfire were easily replicated by Andrew, but more importantly, Andrew could dodge bolts of electricity, and in a couple of instances, flat out statue them. But now in No Way Home, well, all three Spider-Men are pretty relative to each other in speed, since they can all dodge attacks from Electro, with Tobey outperforming Andrew in their brief skirmish, indicating that he is relative to Andrew, possibly even faster than him now. But just like with the other physical stats, they are so similar to each other in speed that I don't see it being the deciding factor, although it is pretty interesting to see that Tobey has gotten faster over the years. Moving on to intelligence, and I think that these two Spider-Men are surprisingly similar, since from a very young age they were able to impress world-renowned scientists in their respective fields. with Tobey's Peter impressing Norman Osborn, demonstrating that he was smarter than Otto Octavius when it came to nuclear physics, a man who spent his entire life studying the subject, with Tobey constantly impressing Kurt Connors throughout the trilogy. And as for Andrew's Peter, well, he was able to instantly figure out the formula that Dr. Connors had been stumped on for literal years. He was able to craft and build his own web shooters, and on a couple of occasions, he demonstrated that he could upgrade them to make them more resistant to Electro's lightning, with it being implied in No Way Home that Andrew has full understanding of things like string theory and multiversal concepts. Not to mention that all three Spider-Men in No Way Home were capable of creating cures for the supervillains with basic materials. When you compare them side by side, I'm fairly certain they'd be able to replicate each other's intelligence feats. But that being said, I would still give the edge to Andrew, as he just impressed me more in his films when it came to using his brains. Moving on now to experience, and yeah, I'm not gonna bullshit you here, Tobey has way more experience than Andrew. Not only was he Spider-Man the longest out of any of the three Spider-Men, but he's also fought the most villains, with him fighting both versions of Green Goblin in his own verse, Doc Ock, Venom, Sandman, Lizard, and Electro. Whereas Andrew has only fought Lizard, Rhino, his version of Green Goblin, and Electro. 7 villains to Andrew's 4, and he spent more time as Spider-Man? Yeah, it's not even close. Not to mention, Tobey is the best of the 3 Spider-Men when it comes to fighting other spider-related characters, as he was able to endure a battle with Venom and eventually came out on top. He won his brief skirmish with Andrew's Peter, and he was able to stand his ground against Tom's Peter, catching his enraged strike whilst Tobey was holding back. Overall, I'd say Tobey's experience gives him a massive edge over Andrew, but will it be enough to counter Andrew's skill, tactics, and combat prowess? Both Tobey and Andrew are dangerous in enclosed spaces, as both Spider-Men employ stealth, but Andrew just takes it to another level. Even back in TASM 1, he could use his webbing to create very elaborate traps. And in TASM 2, whilst he was freaking out with the prospect of saving Gwen Stacy, he came up with a pretty effective battle plan against Electro. Not to mention, Andrew is better at fighting and is way more unpredictable than Tobey, being able to disappear and reappear behind opponents, ensnare opponents from head to toe in webbing whilst crawling around their bodies, instantly counter airborne opponents by latching onto them, using his insane acrobatics to make any indoor environment his playground, and even choke out opponents just like a real spider would. And keep in mind, I don't even think Tobey's spider sense would be able to counter any of this, since Andrew himself also has a spider sense, and a debatably better one. The greatest boon of Tobey's spider sense is that he can detect danger from a massive distance away, but outside of that, it's kind of vanilla compared to the other 2 spider senses. Make no mistake, it gets the job done. From Tobey's perspective, time slows down, and he's able to perceive danger from all around him, but that's kinda it. Andrew's Spider-Man seems like it was intended to be a direct upgrade over Tobey's. He's also able to perceive danger from across the city, and time from his perspective slows down, but he's able to dodge far more impressive attacks than Tobey could in his trilogy. That being said, in No Way Home, Tobey won his brief skirmish against Andrew, and all 3 Spider-Men can dodge Electro's attacks. So either Tobey's spider sense got a buff in No Way Home, or they're about the same in terms of spider sense nowadays. It's just that Andrew's was more impressive in his solo films. However, when discussing who's got the best webbing, yeah, it's pretty clear that it's Tobey. His webbing is more versatile, it has a greater tensile strength as it was able to restrain heavier objects, and unlike Andrew, he doesn't have to worry about his web shooters being destroyed or deactivated mid-fight. We've now gone over what each Spider-Man brings to the table. They have clear-cut advantages over one another, and now we have to decide who wins this fight. And simply put, I think the fight can go either way, depending on the environment they fight in. In an enclosed environment, such as the school or clock tower battle, I think that Andrew would fuck up Tobey's Spider-Man. The way that Andrew fights, such as latching onto opponents' backs, creating traps, or just disappearing mid-battle, battle is stuff that Tobey has never dealt with before, and as a result, I think it would throw him for a loop and Andrew would be able to beat Tobey. Kinda like how Tobey almost fell victim to Venom in Spider-Man 3. In a street fight, however, where it's just both Spider-Men wailing on each other, well, I see Tobey eventually pulling out a victory against Andrew. When it comes to brawling with his villains, Tobey is second to none when it comes to the live-action Spider-Man, as Andrew can never really physically contend with his villains outside of Green Goblin. He usually has to outsmart them. But outsmarting a character who is your physical equal, possibly superior in some instances, is not gonna happen in an environment that doesn't suit your experience. As a result, I don't think Tobey would have too much issue beating Andrew in a street duel. Ultimately, however, if you take environment out of the equation, I do see Tobey slightly pulling ahead of Andrew here. When the two Spider-Men are so fucking similar in terms of prowess, and they both outdo each other in some areas, I think it honestly comes down to who's gonna land the first big hit. And No Way Home gave us the answer. Tobey would land the first hit on Andrew, and from there, I think he would get the advantage throughout the battle. And once Tobey lays a hand on Andrew, well, he can deploy his experience, since, like I said, he's fought Venom in the past. He should be able to fight Andrew, allowing Tobey to pull off a victory, high to extreme difficulty. But that's what I think. What do you guys think? Feel free to let me know in the comment section and consider subscribing to the YouTube channel if you want more versus battles like this. Likewise, if you fancy discussing the matchup, consider joining the Discord server, or maybe tune into live streams every now and then where we play games and talk about your favourite fictional characters. I thank you all for watching, and as always, I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you all in the next one.